Hey folks, today we're sailing off the coast of Japan, but I want to talk about what's going on in America today. We're seeing a huge uptick in violence among young people. Now, why do you think that is? I believe it's been 60 years in the making, but I also believe each of us holds the key to reversing the trend. Folks, it starts with this question. If a blind man steps on your toe, does it hurt? That's the first question. The answer is yes, it does hurt. But would you be offended? No, of course not. Not unless you're a complete jerk. In fact, after your eyes stop watering, you'll probably even offer to help, won't you? However, if that same blind man hopped in the driver's seat with your kids in the back, would you give him the car keys and let him drive the car? And the obvious answer is no, not on your life. And yet we do it every day. I'm Brad Bright. Welcome to the God is Issue podcast, where I show how God is the issue in every issue. Why? Because we can trace all our human problems to our view of God. So would you give a blind man the keys to drive your car if your kids were in the back seat? Here's my point. When a sexually broken person steps on your metaphorical toe, does it hurt? Yes, it does. But as a follower of Jesus, do you return hate for hate? Well, of course not. But what if those same folks take over your local school board wanting to steer your kids' education? Do you give them the keys? Of course not. And yet we do it all the time in real life, don't we? We allow those who disdain God and His values to control the steering wheel of our kids' education. We give them the keys to our kids' minds and hearts. Now, if you truly love your children, how smart is that? Now let's face it, the goal of public education today is to teach your kids to be functional atheists. Let me quickly illustrate what I mean. In which of the following school subjects do your children learn how God is relevant to that subject? Math, history, literature, science? The answer, of course, is none of the above. So after 13 years of learning a wide variety of subjects without any reference to God, what have your kids learned? They've learned that everyday life that omits God still works. In other words, you don't need God in order to make life work. Furthermore, they haven't simply removed God as the source of morality. They've replaced Him. What have they replaced Him with? My truth. And by my truth, our culture means my feelings. In other words, not logic, not science, not objective reality, but purely subjective, ever-shifting feelings. That's why this generation has become the planter's peanut generation. You know, sometimes I feel like a nut, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I feel like a man, sometimes I don't. That's what happens when you remove God as the basis of morality and replace Him with Charles Darwin. That's what happens when you remove love your neighbor and replace it with survival of the fittest. So folks, if you truly love your kids, what is the loving thing to do? It's either to pull your kids out of the car or take the keys away from the anti-God folks. And you can do that through the ballot box. So the only question that remains is, how much do you love your kids? Be more like Jesus, love more, and tolerate less. God is the issue in every issue. This is Brad Bright. Thanks for joining me today, and God bless.